For centuries, humanity has watched the world's most powerful empires rise and fall. We've seen oil tycoons, banking dynasties, and software geniuses amass fortunes that frankly defied imagination. But what just happened in the financial world has completely rewritten the limits of human wealth. SpaceX has officially launched its record-shattering $75 billion IPO. And with it, Elon Musk has done what was once deemed impossible, crossing the threshold to become the planet's very first trillionaire. But behind the glitz of the headlines lies a terrifyingly complex economic machine.
Just look at this number, $1.77 trillion. That is the unprecedented total market valuation of SpaceX as it hits the NASDAQ under the ticker SPCX. To truly understand the scale of this IPO, we have to look past the raw numbers. This pushes the boundaries of individual net worth into an entirely new stratosphere. How did a rocket company that was literally on the brink of bankruptcy a couple of decades ago turn into a financial superpower of this magnitude? And more importantly, it forces us to ask a pretty wild question. What actually happens when a single individual holds more financial weight than entire developed nations? We are moving way past the flashy rocket launches here and looking at the real mechanics of this wealth.
Section 1, the $1.77 trillion math.
Raising $75 billion in a single offering isn't just a record, it is completely uncharted territory for Wall Street. Analysts spent weeks debating if the market could even absorb an offering of this size. But demand didn't just meet expectations, it completely overwhelmed them. But the math gets even crazier. At $135 a share, that massive raise represents only 4.3% of the company's total shares. This relatively tiny public float dictates the massive $1.77 trillion valuation for the remaining 95.7% of shares, which are still held tightly by Elon Musk, insiders, and early investors. This is where the math gets absolutely fascinating. Unlike your traditional tech companies that rely purely on software margins, SpaceX's valuation is driven by deep physical integration, and it's backed up by real cash flow. Their total revenue jumped 33% to $18.7 billion in 2025. They aren't just selling code with high margins, they are anchoring this valuation with heavy manufacturing, massive physical infrastructure, and real, tangible government contracts.
Section 2, Starlink's infrastructure monopoly.
While the public is super focused on Mars rockets, institutional investors are looking at a much closer, highly lucrative asset right here on Earth. By building a near monopoly on global satellite internet, SpaceX didn't just build a space program, they built the foundational infrastructure for the next century of global communications. And the subscriber growth surge is just staggering. From a little beta of just 10,000 users back in 2021, Starlink has exploded, reaching 10.3 million active subscribers across 155 countries by March of 2026. And look at what that user base translates to on the balance sheet. In 2025 alone, Starlink generated $11.4 billion in revenue. That's 61% of SpaceX's total revenue, and crucially, it posted an operating profit of $4.4 billion. It's actually the only segment consistently profitable by standard accounting measures, making it the true infrastructure engine justifying that trillion-dollar ceiling. Without Starlink, SpaceX is a highly successful launch company, but with it, they are a global infrastructure monopoly. But the path to this point definitely wasn't a straight line. Trace this survival trajectory with me. Back in 2008, after 3 failed Falcon 9 launches, the company was literally near bankruptcy. If Musk had given up during that crisis, his biggest asset today might just be a nice house somewhere, definitely not a low Earth orbit monopoly. Surviving that absolute lowest point protected the massive equity stakes that, decades later, catalyzed this trillion-dollar milestone. So the crucial point is how they capitalized on that survival. They built what we can call the infinite data loop. They control the manufacturing, they control the launch systems, and through their satellite constellations, they control the orbital data. When you own the entire supply chain of the modern space economy, traditional valuation models just break down completely. Every successful launch doesn't just put hardware into the sky, it actively compounds the company's data dominance. This infinite loop is exactly what catalyzed Musk's wealth explosion, pushing his personal net worth into the 13-figure club.
Section 3. A sovereign corporate entity.
But this historic milestone brings up an intense global debate. $1 trillion of net worth represents a concentration of economic influence that humanity has rarely seen in the modern era. We're looking at the birth of a sovereign corporate entity. And despite going public, control remains hyper-concentrated through a dual-class share structure.
What this means is that while Elon Musk holds around 42% economic ownership, he retains a massive 78% of the voting power. So he's given up some economic ownership for liquidity, sure, but he retains absolute effective control over the company's decisions that are going to ripple across global markets for generations to come.
Now, it is also absolutely vital to impartially report on the broader market's perspective here. Because while the stock market was in an absolute frenzy, oversubscribing the IPO by 4 times, the bond market is actually flashing some warning signs. SpaceX's bonds are rated BB, indicating high credit risk. Why? Well, because despite Starlink's profitability, SpaceX as a whole reported a net loss of $4.9 billion last year, heavily dragged down by massive investments in Starship and AI. Furthermore, this unrealized paper wealth is highly sensitive to some massive external and geopolitical risks. The sources highlight that SpaceX's forward model is deeply tied to policy variables, FCC spectrum disputes, export controls from the Bureau of Industry and Security, and orbital crowding. Just to put that into perspective, SpaceX spent $17 billion acquiring EchoStar's spectrum portfolio. They didn't spend that to build new technology, they spent it purely to acquire a regulatory asset. That shows you just how critical policy is to their survival. Take a look at the timeline for the FCC's direct-to-device, or D2D, spectrum rulemaking in the second half of 2026. This is a massive catalyst. Favorable approvals could skyrocket Starlink's capabilities even further, but adverse regulatory rulings could drastically compress this unrealized paper wealth. Musk's trillionaire status isn't just locked in a vault somewhere, it's heavily dependent on these ongoing regulatory battles. Section 4. The next human milestone. The SpaceX IPO isn't just a win for Wall Street, it's a definitive turning point in human history. It grants a single private entity unparalleled leverage over international satellite infrastructure, defense contracts, and the literal future of interplanetary colonization. The race to the next milestone has officially begun. So what do you guys think? Is a single individual holding this much infrastructure power a huge leap forward for innovation, or is it a massive risk for the global economy? Let me know your perspective in the comments below, smash that like button, and subscribe to keep up with the tech shaping our future. I'll see you in the next explainer.